In the summer of 2002, the online world was still young. Dial-up tones, message boards, and niche gaming communities quietly forming in the corners of the internet. But among those early circles was one name people didn't forget: Evan Callister, a rising polo gamer who had unexpectedly blended the world of competitive virtual gaming with the real-life elite sport of horseback polo. At 24, he had a following, small by today's standards, but loyal. He was part athlete, part entertainer, part mystery even before anything strange happened. Outside the screen, Evan lived for the saddle. While most early gamers stayed indoors, Evan trained with his Argentine gelding, Marengo, racing across green fields by day and streaming gameplay at night. His dedication made him unusual, magnetic, and slightly intimidating to those who knew him. So when he announced a brief reset trip to Yosemite National Park, a tradition he did before every major polo season, no one questioned it. Yosemite was his sanctuary, a place he claimed helped clear the noise. He rode into the park on July 18, 2002. He never rode out. For 5 years, the investigation stalled. No body, no gear, no clues, until a pair of hikers stumbled across something in a remote ravine, a skeletal horse with tacks still intact. DNA confirmed what everyone feared. It was Marengo. What remained unanswered was the larger question: where was Evan? And what happened in those final hours? Evan wasn't the type to vanish. Friends and teammates from the polo circuit later told investigators that he was too disciplined, too habitual. His training schedule was a machine, nothing left to chance. That was partly why the trip to Yosemite confused people. He'd just come off a strong spring season, streaming multiple gaming tournaments between travel weeks. His following online was growing fast. A few of his clips even appeared on early gaming forums where he was celebrated for his unusual dual-life persona. But stress had been creeping in. His best friend and polo teammate, Jordan Vale, recalled that Evan seemed restless during their last match. He missed easy shots, rushed plays, and after the game, he didn't hang around the stables like he usually did. Instead, he packed up early and left with Marengo in the trailer. Jordan said one thing stuck with him. He kept checking over his shoulder, like someone had followed him. At first, investigators dismissed it. Stress, exhaustion, pressure, it was all plausible. But Evan's streaming history backed the claim. His last broadcast, 2 nights before disappearing, showed him distracted. He paused mid-game several times, staring off camera at something or someone. The comments lit up. "Bro, you okay? Someone at your place? You keep looking behind you." He ended the stream early, apologizing and saying he had an early morning, clear-the-mind ride planned. 2 days later, he entered Yosemite. The entrance logs. At 6:47 a.m., park records show Evan's signature at the Tioga Pass entry. Rangers remembered him: friendly, talkative, charismatic. He asked about backcountry solitude zones, the type of places where people could disappear for a while in a good way. He wore a lightweight riding vest, hiking-style reins customized for long trails, and carried 2 days' worth of food. Nothing alarming. Nothing strange. Except for one detail. Evan refused a map. He told the ranger he knew the park and had ridden it a dozen times. Which wasn't true. Search teams later checked records. Evan had visited Yosemite twice, both on foot. Never with a horse. Never into deep backcountry. Why lie? The last confirmed sighting. Around 9:10 a.m., 2 hikers spotted him traveling south along a narrow ridge trail. They later recounted how confident he looked: upright posture, steady reins, slow but deliberate pace, like he was heading somewhere specific. Marengo looked perfect. No signs of distress, no injuries. But the hikers also noted this. Evan didn't acknowledge them. He didn't wave, nod, or smile. He stared straight ahead as if he hadn't even seen them. That behavior was so uncharacteristic that both hikers mentioned it independently. Evening approaches. Evan's route that morning should have brought him back down by early afternoon. Instead, the hours passed without sightings. By sundown, no one saw him near any designated horse camps. Meanwhile, his trailer sat untouched in the lot. No boot prints. No sign he ever intended to return. His disappearance officially started at 11:30 p.m. when a ranger reported the unattended rig. By dawn, search teams covered every reachable trail. Nothing. Not even hoofprints. Yosemite was silent. And Evan Callister had vanished. Search teams began at sunrise on July 19th, sweeping all known equestrian trails. Yosemite rangers were used to rescues, hikers with sprained ankles, lost tourists, dehydrated campers, but a missing mounted rider was rare. Horses leave tracks. Horses make noise. Horses come home unless something prevents them. But from the first day, something was off. No tracks, no sign of passage. Rangers fanned out across the ridge where the hikers last spotted Evan. The soil there was dry and thin. A horse's hooves should have left clear impressions, even if only faint. But the trail behind that sighting point was spotless, almost untouched. No prints leading away, no disturbed gravel, nothing to indicate a 1,000-pound animal had passed through hours earlier. Then came the stranger detail. There were also no prints leading to the ridge. It was as if Evan and Marengo appeared on that trail section without approaching from anywhere. Rangers initially thought the hikers misidentified the location. But both hikers insisted they saw him precisely at a bend overlooking Cathedral Creek. A distinctive place. Hard to mistake. And both described the same odd detail. The horse looked nervous, like it was walking stiff. That mattered later. The abandoned campfire. 2 days into the search, a ranger team discovered a small, freshly extinguished fire down in a ravine off an unofficial trail. At first, they thought it belonged to a backpacker, but the ashes were clean. No food scraps, no cans, no paper waste. Whoever made it burned only wood. Nearby, officers found a single object. A piece of leather strap, cut cleanly as if with a knife. Tests later confirmed it was horse tack. Not Marengo's, at least not from what was later recovered, but consistent with riding gear. The location was strange. Steep, uneven, difficult for a horse to access. Why would Evan go there? And if he did, why no other traces? No hoofprints, no broken branches, no dropped belongings. Nothing. The ravine felt staged, like someone had been there but wanted to leave only enough to confuse the search. The unsettling radio call. On day 4 of the search, rangers picked up a faint, intermittent crackling on an open-band radio channel, someone breathing heavily between bursts of static. Rangers thought it was interference from a distant hiker's pack radio. Until a ranger clearly heard. "Help! Can't see it." The voice sounded male. "Young." When the dispatcher repeated, "Identify yourself," the voice didn't answer. Instead, it whispered, "Don't let it see you." Then silence. Rangers later analyzed signal data. The transmission originated somewhere within a 6-mile radius, but uneven granite walls made pinpointing difficult. Still, there was one major issue. Evan didn't carry a radio. He'd refused one at the entrance gate. So who made the call? Or was someone else nearby? Marengo's missing tracks. By the end of the first week, the search switched from rescue to recovery. A mounted rider and horse rarely survive long in deep backcountry without supplies. Rangers mapped search grids, coordinating drones, dogs, helicopters. But one detail bothered everyone. If Marengo had traveled into backcountry, he should have left distinct trails. Horses are predictable. They seek water sources, avoid steep slopes, stick to instinctual paths. Helicopters scanned water lines, expecting to find at least some evidence of an animal traveling. But nothing existed. No broken foliage. No hoof prints. No manure. No bite marks on meadow grass. It was as if the horse vanished the moment the hikers last saw it. A ranger's theory. Lead investigator, Ranger Elise Dunbar, suggested something unconventional. He didn't go deeper. He went off the trail. Somewhere we're not looking. When questioned, she pointed to Yosemite's undocumented zones, old fire roads swallowed by regrowth, forgotten irrigation routes, collapsed mine shafts dating back a century. She believed Evan may have followed something, or someone, into one of these restricted areas. But with 750,000 acres of terrain, that theory didn't narrow much. The online clue. While the physical search stalled, Evan's small but devoted online followers noticed something unsettling on his gaming forum profile. His account was active 3 days after he vanished. Not a post, just a login. A single ping. It came from an IP address traced to a public lodge outside Yosemite. Investigators rushed there, hoping the missing rider had doubled back. But security footage showed no one resembling Evan. And the timestamp was 3:14 a.m. Who logged into his account? And why? No device was ever found on Evan's person. He didn't bring his laptop on the trip. This meant someone else had his password, or accessed something he left behind. But what? The search fades out. After 3 weeks, the official search concluded. The case shifted to the missing persons list, and Yosemite returned to its usual summer rhythm. To the public, Evan was just another disappearance in a wilderness known for swallowing hikers. But those who knew him never accepted it. His discipline, his plans, his routines, nothing fit with an accident. Something had pulled him off course. Something had kept him from returning. Something no one could yet identify. But 5 years later, Yosemite would finally give up part of its secret. And that secret started with Marengo. It was October 2007 when 2 hikers, a married couple from Fresno, decided to take an unmarked detour toward a rocky gorge. The route wasn't on any map, but locals knew it as a scenic, though unstable, cut leading toward an old irrigation channel. Most avoided it. The ground shifted easily after rain. They weren't planning to go far. But 20 minutes into the gorge, the wife stopped abruptly. Because there, partially covered in dirt and pine debris, was a horse. Or what remained of one. The remains. The skeleton lay on its side, perfectly articulated, as though the horse had simply lain down and passed peacefully. The leather bridle and chest strap remained intact, though weathered. The saddle was gone. So were the reins. The couple reported it immediately. Rangers arrived the next morning and quickly suspected the truth. This wasn't a wild Mustang. This was a riding horse. DNA confirmed it within the week. Marengo. But what disturbed investigators wasn't the fact the horse was dead. It was how it died. No signs of injury. There were no fractures typical of falls. No evidence of animal attack. No rope burns. No signs the horse struggled. Marengo wasn't tied down, trapped, hunted, or dragged. He appeared to have simply collapsed. A natural death. Possible, but unlikely. He was young, well-trained, and in peak condition. Horses like that don't simply drop unless something happened internally. The veterinary examiner proposed. Sudden cardiac event. Extreme stress. Or poisoning. But poisoning how? And by whom? Evan carried no toxic substances. More baffling was the location. A place horses shouldn't reach. The gorge where Marengo was found was nearly inaccessible for a horse. The incline was too steep. The rock layers too unstable. Rangers struggled to reach the site on foot. A mounted animal would have slipped instantly. Marengo's skeleton shouldn't have been there. Meaning, someone led him there. Or whatever happened forced the horse into terrain he wouldn't choose. Then came the worst detail. 5 hoofprints, then nothing. Just 5. 5 distinct hoof impressions in a patch of soft dirt about 30 yards away. After that, the trail stopped completely. Not faded. Not eroded. Stopped. As though the horse had materialized in the gorge and collapsed. But horses don't teleport. And they don't walk 30 yards and then leave no trace. Unless they weren't walking freely. Unless something or someone was directing their path in a controlled way. Investigators were now certain. If Marengo was there, Evan had been near him that same day. So where was the rider? The saddle strap. During a second sweep, rangers uncovered a partially buried strip of leather, thicker, darker, and clearly cut. This matched the strap they found 5 years earlier at the fire pit. Someone had cut parts of Marengo's tack. Not torn. Cut. As if removing select pieces intentionally. But for what? No one steals random horse tack in the middle of a national park. It had no resale value. No purpose. Unless the tack wasn't what mattered. Unless it held something. The burned patch. 10 feet away from the remains was a circular patch of soil, blackened. Not fresh, but scorched long ago. A small, controlled fire had burned there. Investigators took samples. Fuel traces came back as pine resin, animal fat residue, and cotton fibers. Someone had burned something fabric-based near the horse after it died. Was it Evan's clothing? Bandages? Gear? Or something belonging to whoever was with him? Without forensic freshness, no conclusions could be made. But one ranger said, "This wasn't the site of an accident. This was the end of a route. They stopped here for a reason." A final clue. Human presence. What changed everything was a single fragment of bone. Human. Small, chipped, and burned around the edge. The lab confirmed it wasn't ancient. It wasn't Native American remains. It wasn't old settler relic. It was modern. Likely from the last decade. Too small to identify an individual. But enough to prove that a human was burned at that exact location. Yet it wasn't Evan. Testing ruled that out. So who did that bone belong to? A stranger? An accomplice? Another victim? Or someone Evan followed into the wilderness? No answers came. But the case escalated again, quietly, internally. Rangers now believed something violent or secretive happened in that gorge. Something involving more than a lost polo gamer. And now they had to uncover the rest. 3 weeks after Marengo's remains were recovered, Yosemite launched a quiet, internal investigation. No press releases, no interviews, no public search grids. They didn't want attention on what they now suspected, that Evan's disappearance was not an accident, and not a simple missing person case. Ranger Elise Dunbar, the one who had always believed that Evan went off the trail, led a 6-person team into the gorge where the horse had been found. Their assignment was precise. Find out how Marengo got there. Find out who brought him. The first breakthrough came from something small, barely noticeable, unless you knew what to look for. The scarred rock line. About 50 feet uphill from the horse's skeleton, Dunbar noticed a faint scrape on the granite wall, as if something large had brushed against it. The mark was curved, polished, and smoother than the surrounding stone. She knew immediately. That's a horseshoe scrape. But it wasn't from normal riding. It was from a horse sliding. Horses don't willingly scramble up or down sheer granite slopes. If they slip on terrain like that, it's because something pushed them into it, or something spooked them so intensely that they attempted to escape an impossible angle. Dunbar radioed the team. "We're in the wrong place. The route isn't to the gorge. It's above it. The hidden pathway." They climbed another 100 feet up, digging through brush and fallen branches, until one ranger found a depression in the ground, thin, shallow, but repetitive. Hoof prints. Almost invisible. Soft. Not deep enough for normal travel. As if the horse had been walking slowly. Reluctantly. Under pressure. The trail snaked along a narrow rock shelf, nearly a ledge. It wasn't on any map because it wasn't a trail. It was a remnant of an old irrigation line carved into the mountain in the late 1800s. A human could walk it. A horse would never choose it. Unless led. The rope marks. Half a mile along the hidden ledge, the team spotted something chilling. Rope wear along the rock. Thin streaks burned into the stone from repeated tension. They ran their fingers across it and felt the subtle indentation. A rope tied to something heavy. Held taut. Dragged or pulled. Dunbar's voice went quiet. He didn't walk Marengo up here. He was leading him by rope. Or someone else was. The rope marks ascended steeply, then abruptly disappeared at a sharp corner, like someone had tied the animal and let it stand or struggle there. And at that corner, the ground changed. The drop zone. Just beyond the bend lay a natural choke point, a narrow slit of stone where the ledge narrowed to only 2 feet wide. The rangers crouched, analyzing scrape patterns. Multiple horseshoe marks. Some light, some deep, some so violently pressed into the rock that the metal must have bent on impact. This was not calm passage. This was panic. Something terrified Marengo enough to fight against the path, pushing sideways, scraping the rock with desperate kicks. And yet, the horse had been forced forward anyway. Dunbar whispered. Someone drove him down this route. And then the trail ended abruptly at the top of the same ravine where Marengo's skeleton was found. It all matched. He had been led, by rope or pressure, down a terrain that would kill any horse. But he survived the descent. He survived long enough to walk 30 more yards. Then he collapsed. But that raised a new question. Where was Evan during this? Leading him, or being led himself? The second fire site. While studying the ravine from above, one ranger noticed something odd. Another blackened circle of soil, nearly identical to the one near Marengo's remains but older, more eroded. This one sat on the ledge itself, hidden behind a jagged boulder. The burn radius was small, barely 3 feet. And what they found inside it changed the investigation again. 3 melted metal buckles. 2 charred bone fragments. 1 iron nail. Not modern equipment. Old. Possibly over a century. They brought the items back to the lab. The results were perplexing. The bone fragments were human. The nail was from a 19th-century gate hinge. The metal buckles resembled those from 1800s mule harnesses. It meant one thing. Someone else, separate from Evan, had been burned in that area long before 2002. A second disappearance. A second event. Possibly linked. The unknown structure. Dunbar's team climbed further up the mountainside following increasingly older signs, rust flakes, bits of iron, wood fragments preserved in shadow. Finally, behind a screen of overgrowth, they found it. A collapsed wooden structure, half swallowed by earth. No bigger than a storage shed. Unstable. Rotting. Forgotten. Inside lay decayed rope coils. An empty lantern. Iron hooks bolted into the wall. A rotted-through cattle brand. And on the floor, one final object. A long strip of leather with a fresh cut. Same angle, same tool signature as the strap found near Marengo. Dunbar held it carefully. There were 2 sets of events here. One long ago. One in 2002. And something in this place connects them. The shed wasn't a cabin or camp. It was a holding place. For animals. For gear. Maybe for people. The team realized what the clues were pointing to. Evan didn't stumble into danger. He followed a path laid long before he arrived. A trail someone else once took, ending the same way. A trail that had been used again. Someone, or something, was still using it. By early 2008, the Park Service quietly compiled everything. The 2 burn sites, the rope marks, the hidden ledge, and Marengo's unnatural route. They built a timeline, not of Evan's final day, but of what must have happened. This wasn't random. This wasn't natural. This wasn't an accident. This was a pattern. The night at Yosemite Gate. Witness interviews re-examined revealed something previously dismissed. A couple staying near the entrance reported hearing a horse at around 2 a.m. the night before Evan vanished. Slow. Uneven. Like it didn't want to walk. But Evan didn't enter the park until 6:47 a.m. So who brought a horse in before him? The timeline cracked open. The shadow on the stream. Investigators re-watched Evan's last gaming stream. The moment he kept glancing over his shoulder. His behavior changed halfway through after a faint reflection flickered behind him in the window. Not a person. Not clear. But shaped like something tall. When the brightness was enhanced, the shape resembled a rider. Sitting still. Watching him. But no figure appeared behind Evan in the room. There was no one physically there. Which raised a chilling possibility. He wasn't looking at something in his room. He was looking at something in the reflection, behind him, outside the window. But his apartment faced an alley with no access. Unless someone was on horseback. A horse that left no sound, no hoofprints, no traces. Investigators rejected the idea of stalking on horseback. It made no logical sense. But they couldn't explain the reflection. The hidden event in 1886. Researchers uncovering Yosemite's lesser-known archives found a forgotten report from 1886. A rancher named Calvin Hurst vanished while searching for a missing mule team in the same region as the gorge. Only the mule skeletons were recovered, deep in a ravine they should never have reached. His ledger mentioned following the rider without tracks. He thinks he can't be seen. The phrase matched the mysterious radio transmission from 2002. Coincidence? Or repetition? The final reconstruction. After months, the investigative team agreed on a working theory. Evan followed something into the backcountry. Voluntarily. Curiously. Maybe fearfully. Maybe the same trackless rider that Calvin Hurst wrote about. From the moment Evan left the Ridge Trail, he was no longer navigating the wilderness alone. Someone else guided his route. Someone who avoided leaving tracks, worked at night, used rope pressure to control Marengo, led them to the hidden ledge, drove the horse into panic, stopped at 2 fire points, removed selective tack pieces, burned certain objects, hid in places untouched for a century. Investigators couldn't identify the culprit. Not a person. Not conclusively. But they knew this. Evan was alive when he reached the upper ledge. He was alive when Marengo panicked. He was alive when Marengo was forced down the impossible slope. And after the horse collapsed, something else happened. The second human remains. When the small burned bone near Marengo was tested a second time in 2008 with newer methods, something unexpected emerged. It belonged to a male. Age roughly mid-20s. Death within the last decade. Not 1800s. Not ancient. It was from 2002. It was Evan. Part of him burned at the site. But only part. No full remains. No clothing. No other bones. Just a fragment. Meaning someone burned part of him and took the rest. The case was closed internally as partial recovery, homicide unlikely, cause undetermined. Publicly, Yosemite never announced the findings. The narrative remained. Evan Callister vanished in 2002. Only his horse was found. Privately, rangers believed this. He was taken by someone who also operated decades earlier. Someone who stalked remote riders. Someone who avoided leaving tracks. Someone who led victims into the same terrain every time. Someone who still might be out there. And to this day, no ranger goes near that ledge alone. They say on windy nights you can hear something, a rope dragging on stone, a horse snorting nervously, a rider whispering. Don't let it see you. Evan Callister's disappearance became one of Yosemite's most unsettling unsolved cases, not because of its violence or scale, but because of its precision. Everything that happened to him seemed orchestrated, guided, or repeated from an older pattern set long before he ever arrived. For the public, he was a rising polo gamer who went into the wilderness and never returned. For investigators, he was a man who followed something into a place he shouldn't have been, something that used terrain, fear, and darkness to corral its victims. Marengo's remains gave only partial answers, and Evan's bone fragment gave even less. The rest of his body has never been found. His gear never surfaced. His saddle, reins, and clothing never appeared in any ranger purge, black market tax sale, or dusted cabin. Even more haunting is the silent trail, the rope-scarred ledge, the old fire pits, the collapsed holding shed, and the burn sites that span more than a century. Yosemite's backcountry hides corners where time feels layered, where events echo through decades, repeating themselves with unnerving similarity. People who knew Evan, the gamers who watched his streams, the polo teammates who respected him, still say he wouldn't have left willingly. And based on everything investigators uncovered, they're right. Something drew him in. Something drove his horse to collapse. Something burned part of him and removed the rest. And whatever that something is, it never left the mountain.